Brother Hamza, assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Thank you for coming to see me this morning.
It's no problem at all.
Not a bad morning in Aberdeen today.
Yes,
Now, you are from here, from Aberdeen.
from Aberdeen, yes. Born in Aberdeen, brought up in Aberdeen.
Mm. Now, tell me about your journey to Islam. How did it start?
Well, I was brought up secular. My family are not religious at all. They would probably consider themselves Christian, though they don't really practice anything. So I felt by the time I was in my mid to late 20s that I had a space, an empty something. So I looked quite deeply into Mormonism, and I thought, lovely people, but a lot of the things they believe just don't make sense.
What was your family supposed to be? Protestant?
Yes, Church of Scotland. No, they're very much non-practicing. They don't really follow anything, to be honest, although they're not atheists.
What made you search? I mean, was there something? Or?
I've done a lot of volunteering, and I've met a few Muslims on the way, and they weren't particularly practicing, but I liked the fact that they were always truthful, and their akhlaq, attracted me. They were always, very nice and very, open. So that kind of sort of attracted me to begin with.
Yeah, but you even started searching before you met the Muslims, right? You were looking for something to fill the void.
Yes, I think I always had this feeling that there was something, like I needed to belong to something, because I didn't really have that growing up. I always felt like the odd one out. I was always trying to fit in with various peer groups and things like that, and that failed. So I had this feeling that I was kind of like the odd one out.
And you were volunteering doing what?
I was volunteering in a charity bookshop and also a cafe, which used to be in a library.
And it's there where you met some Muslims?
Yes, one or two.
People who came from outside the UK, or were they from here?
A mixture, really. And again, they generally weren't really that practicing, but obviously I knew they were Muslim, and that kind of fascinated me. And obviously by this time, you'd had all the major events happen, and by this time I was very concerned about how the Western foreign policy was affecting Muslims across the world, to the point I would be quite outspoken at home, and it caused a bit of friction with my mother even.
Are you usually attracted to current affairs? I mean, you were following news?
Yes, I think so. I think I've always had this interest in what's going on in the world around about me, not necessarily in my own environment. I think a lot of people, they just, day to day, and it doesn't bother them. Whereas me, I always take an interest in what's going on in other parts of the world, and I always try to inform myself about these things.
Was there something specific that made you take that decision? Because it's not an easy decision, is it?
It's not, no. I suppose, if I'm to be honest, the catalyst would be I met my fiancée online, and I learned a lot from her. I mean, I didn't convert for this person at all, but I think, as again, the Muslims have a good way about them and very kind, and that really attracted me. So I could say that was kind of like the catalyst, but that wasn't. I was already on that path already, because obviously certain world events had happened, and I always knew about Islam. I mean, one of my earliest memories, Islam-wise, would be I was in primary 5 or 6 and playing with my pencil, pretending it was a minaret, trying to sort of mimic the adhan. I don't even know where I'd heard this. It's probably on the news somewhere, because I remember, obviously growing up, there was conflicts in like Bosnia and Chechnya, and I knew these people were Muslim, but I didn't actually know the full, and we always had lots of factual books at home about civilizations and history and that, and I would sit and I would read them. I didn't always understand what I was reading, but it stands out in my mind that I would look at the pages that were talking about the Prophet, peace be upon him, and the coming of Islam and these things. And always, religion and theology have always been a fascination for me. Even continuously, I still like to find out about people's beliefs and things, besides my own.
And I guess that the period you were growing up was a period full of major events involving the Muslims.
Definitely, yes. As you know, time has gone on, maybe since the late 70s, the Muslims have been forefront of the news, not always in a good way. I mean, often the media does paint this in a particular light, which is really unhelpful, unfortunately. And I would really dearly love for the media to actually, take a look at what it's saying, because they've done numerous studies in various Western countries and came to the conclusion that maybe, I don't know, of over half of stories that are relating to Muslims are negative ones.
Yeah.
Whereas, if you look at the community as a whole, we do so much good. I mean, think about Ramadan, for example. The Muslim community spends more in charity than any other community in the country. And there's actually now the Muslim pound is people, the supermarkets, they sell halal products and they sell so much, things that the Muslim community buys. And I think it would be stupid for a supermarket or shop these days to ignore that side of things, because we're a commodity now.
I think despite the the generally negative coverage of Islam and the Muslims, as time goes by, things are really improving for Islam and the Muslims. I mean, I remember when I was a young student here in the 70s, the idea of buying halal things from a corner shop was impossible to think about. It's simply that wasn't in existence. But nowadays, I mean, probably this happened to you. Wherever you go, you see Islam around.
Yes.
Or you see the Muslims.
Yes, that's very true. And as time has gone on, that's become more visible. I mean, we have several halal shops in Aberdeen. We're fortunate that a few of the supermarkets also stock these things, so we're very fortunate. Whereas if you'd gone back, to when you were a student, that wouldn't have been.
Yeah.
People wouldn't even have known. But now people know. Even I had one person ask me recently. They asked me if I'm a revert. So some people, they actually know and they study. They know the terminology. Even some of these people, they know better than a lot of Muslims. I've found.
You had the readiness. You were already searching, but then you became acquainted with this person who became your fiancée.
Yes.
And she probably helped. She aided you.
Yes, definitely.
Which country is she from?
She's from Indonesia.
Ah. And you plan to get married,
Yes,
I suppose?
I plan to get married. Go back out there as soon as possible. I went out some years ago, only very briefly, just as COVID was breaking out. So, all but briefly, I was there, and I honestly can't wait to go back.
Well, I wish you the best, inshallah.
Thank you.
Now, let's talk about the moment of conversion. Was it here in this?
It was actually in the Spittal Mosque.
In Edinburgh, in Aberdeen.
In Aberdeen, yes, the original, which was the original mosque of Aberdeen, and it was after Ramadan 2015. So I missed out on that Ramadan, and I had one acquaintance who I'd more or less just met, who was my witness, and then there was another brother who's gone on to be quite a good friend, who was also my second witness. And I don't really remember much about it. I just remember we prayed. It must have been Asr or Doha, I can't remember, and then said my Shahada, and I don't really remember much else about that day, to be quite honest.
How was the reception within the Muslim community?
It was good, yeah. Yeah, it's...
Are you closely associated with the community?
Yes, I would say I'm very active in volunteering, and I have, I volunteer during Ramadan most years, and I help various community things, and I have a dawah stall that I help run with a few brothers, usually on a Saturday, but quite often on a weekday, weather permitting, and that's been quite well received actually by people. You would probably be surprised the amount of people that actually stop by, and we don't preach, we don't do anything of that nature. We have the copies of the Quran and various types of literature that we give out, and we let that do the talking for us. If someone wants to find out about Islam, they can ask us a question. But I feel personally I don't really have enough knowledge. Sometimes I've had like a sheikh or an imam with me, but that's only very rarely. But some of the other brothers that are involved have got much more experience and knowledge than me. So if I can't answer a question, which is quite often, I'll defer them to this brother. And I really enjoy it. We've recently started giving the tea and biscuits and sweet things because as like an icebreaker, because maybe people, I don't think in Aberdeen people are particularly religious, so they generally don't want to stop and talk about these things.
So you entice them with a cup of tea.
Yes, we try and bribe them with tea, and I think it works. So we'll try and continue in that vein. But I think...
Well, as you said, it breaks the ice.
It does, yeah. But I think also the problem is not enough of us actually get involved in this work.
Where do you do it? In town?
In the city centre. Always in the same...
One place?
Yes.
Always?
Almost always in the same place.
And you don't face any problems?
Well, I wouldn't say that. I mean, we have been threatened with violence, and we have had...
Oh, really?
Yeah. We've had people...
right on the spot?
Yes. If I can mention, there was one case where there was two rather drunk gentlemen came and they started talking, saying to us things that weren't true, and we tried to sort of, debate with them and tell them, that's not true. Where did you hear that? This kind of thing, and they kind of threatened me and my colleagues, and then they proceeded to run away because there was three of us and two of them. But this sort of thing happens very rarely. I mean, occasionally, maybe something like someone will drive past in their car and shout Allahu Akbar out the window or something like that, or just react negatively if they see me in Islamic dress, for example, even just the fact that I visibly, look different. And I think it's maybe more hard for our sisters, because obviously they are quite visible if they decide to wear hijab. And then I've had friends who tell me that they have had someone drive past and soak them with their car, simply for the fact that they saw it was a Muslim family, and they weren't sure if it was deliberate or not, but I'm pretty sure it probably was. I mean, there is an element of, I don't know, it's like resentment. Some people, they seem to resent the fact that we're here, not just us Muslims, but, any other different, community, whether that's, people of a different skin color or a different nationality. They seem, a small section of society seems to have this idea that we're being, and obviously it's promoted by the media.
Unfortunately,
they deliberately do this.
I think it's a mixture of ignorance as well as arrogance on the part of people who do this without giving or trying to give themselves a chance to find out who these people are.
Yes.
What's behind them.
I find often people don't want to know. Some people will just you'll offer them a leaflet or something, they'll just swear at you.
Well, there's no compulsion.
That's true. Yes.
in religion. Now, do you need permission to do this from the council or anybody?
No
or
one's
you
told
just
me that.
We
just do it, as and when we have the inclination to. No one's ever told me that I need a license or anything like that, because on a Saturday, for example, there are quite a lot of different, political and religious groups, using that space to share their message. And we get on fairly well with most of them, although certain ones are not really liked by the public for the way that they go about what they're doing. Even we had some guys, again, they were quite drunk, stop by and said to us, why can't they be like you? And if these people...
Subhanallah. They make comparisons.
Exactly. If these people can see it, then, everyone else can see it too. That made me feel good, because it feels like we're actually maybe not making a difference, but we're actually appreciated. And
well, I think your presence is being felt. That's important, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, let me go back to your family. You said your family was not particularly religious.
Not at all.
When they knew of your conversion, what was their reaction?
Yeah, that was a tough one. I mean, I can remember the day, actually. I mean, my mum, she had this dog, and I would walk him, and I'd gone out for a walk, and I came back. I'd left actually I got a certificate with my reversion certificate, and I left it on my bed, and my mother had gone to put washing or something like that. And when I came back, my parents are in their bedroom. I can hear them like agitated. My younger sister's quite agitated. So they tried to sort of, what's this? You're become Muslim, and because my mum, I think she knew that was coming, because at some point she told me all about brainwashed and these sort of things.
Is it because they had an anti-Muslim stance, or is it because they had an anti-religion stance?
I think it's more anti-religion, and again because the information you get from the media, and I don't think they actually believe this stuff. Eventually they have sort of, especially my dad, they have come to sort of even my mum, to the realization that it's not a phase, because it's been 9 years, almost 10 years now.
How old were you when you embraced Islam?
I think I was 28.
Oh.
Something like that.
And you were staying at home with the family?
Yes, I was staying at home. I've since moved out. I've got my own place, alhamdulillah. But it was quite tough living in that situation.
How is your relationship with your family now?
Better. Still not ideal. Really not ideal. But I always meet my father on a Tuesday. We go for a coffee and we always meet up. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important to maintain the relationship.
Yes, and he understands. He even, I think my mother, she's actually asked me more questions than my father has. I think my dad accepts it. He said to me at one point that he would never accept it, but he accepts it, I think, because he knows I go to the mosque, and he knows I'm quite. It's an important part of my life. Even my mother, as much as I think she seems to be anti-clerical, I think she's come to the realization that it's not just a 5-minute flash in the pan.
They know that it's there to stay.
Yes, I think so. But because we don't actually discuss these things, my family are not the most conversational, to be honest.
Yeah, but who knows? With the passage of time, they might, or some, or one or more, might become interested.
Yeah.
I've heard amazing stories from some brothers and sisters.
That's true. Sometimes the most unexpected quarters, get people who totally, flip over. I actually had a dream recently that my father was actually looking into Islam.
Subhanallah.
Which was very surprising because he stated to me on a number of occasions that for him the idea of God went out with the dinosaurs.
Wow.
Yeah.
To that extent.
Yes.
Were they members of a certain political group? Or?
Not really, no. No, I don't think, no, my dad's not really involved in politics, neither is my mum. They would probably class themselves as Christian, but they don't really, it's not something that plays an important part in their life, and it never played a part in my life growing up. The only religious instruction I would have got would have been when I was in primary 6. The teacher there was very much a committed Christian, and she would ask the class to recite the Lord's Prayer every afternoon. That's the limit of my, religious instruction as a child. It was non-existent.
How about your friends and acquaintances? Did you have friends before you converted?
Yes. Quite a few of them actually, turned away, and I don't have anything to do with them now. But the majority of them accepted, and obviously the majority of my friends now are through the masjid. So I have a small amount of non-Muslim friends, and they all understand, and we have a good relationship, and there's no animosity or anything like that. Even like, for example, my older sister, I have 3 siblings, and my older sister, we get on quite well. It hasn't always been the case, but I think out of all the family members, my 2 elder siblings are probably the most open to my faith.
Some I remember some brothers and sisters telling me that their family members, close family members, told them that they realized after a while that Islam made them better persons.
Yes.
And that started having a positive impact on them.
Yes. Well, I hope that's the case with my family, but again, like I said, because they're not really, how would you put it, conversational, they're not really communicative to the point. More like most people, we don't really talk about these things.
Do you have a sense that more people are interested in Islam nowadays?
100%. Yes. I've had incidents where people have come to the stall and wanted to say the Shahada. Quite often people will stop by and they'll, what is this? Even sometimes people, obviously they've worked in the Middle East and they'll say Salam, or they'll go, oh, Quran, and, they'll actually react. They don't necessarily stop, but they'll react in a positive way because they know, they know what it is. And you'd probably be surprised the amount of people who actually have read the Quran, and they realize that, the media is really one of our worst enemies, and they're painting us in a way that is disingenuous because it's not the true picture of how we are.
I think Islam is no longer as strange as it used to be. Despite the fact that the media is quite negative in its coverage, even negative coverage arouses people's interest.
Yeah. Yeah, you hear stories of people, for example, wanting to quote, understand it, as they term it, terrorist book, and then they read the Quran and they realize, that there's no way that the book that talks about the universe expanding, the book that talks about embryology, the water table, mountains, sleep, so many things have been scientifically, even the fact, the amount of joints we have in our body, the Quran says is a particular number. Science until very recently said there was a different number. And then they realized, they came to the realization that there's like 20 joints in your ear or something like that. So the Quran has been, proven right. Science has corrected, and even science corrects the Bible. No, sorry, the Quran corrects Christianity in the Bible. There's instances in the Bible where it talks about Pharaoh, and it only uses Pharaoh, whereas the Quran will use king and Pharaoh interchangeably, because obviously at one point Pharaoh was the name of the household, it wasn't the actual name of the ruler. So the Quran corrects the inaccuracies in the other revelations that have been put over time, as people have changed, So for me, there's no way that the Quran came from any other source than Allah, because the amount of things it talks about and even things that have probably not even yet been proven.
Yeah, sure.
So it's just
interesting you brought up the issue of Pharaoh. I don't know if you're familiar with the work of forensic scientist Maurice Bucaille.
Yes.
He has a brilliant book on this called Moses and the Pharaoh.
Yes.
Where he compares scientific findings on the one hand with the Quranic narration and the biblical narration.
Yes. In fact, I've given people copies of this book.
Oh, really?
I've not read it myself, but I've heard good things about him, and I was aware of his work, so I've given it to a few people to read. It's one I like to have in our material, because it's a very I think people, when you're giving dawah to people in this country, in the West, who a lot of people are Darwinists, they're atheists, they're scientists, for want of a better word. So to speak to these people, you need to come at them with, maybe some people don't like this, but with the scientific miracles of the Quran, the heliocentric universe, the expanding universe, the embryology. I mean, I heard a midwife, she said that the Quranic description of the embryology was totally correct. And this person, this lady, she was a complete atheist. She did not believe in anything. So if these people can see, that the Quran is, truth, then there's hope for wider society. I think if people just need to, open up their eyes a little and, look past the shortcomings of the Muslim community and realize that don't look at Muslims, look at the source, look at the Quran, the Hadith, look at the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him. Don't look at the Muslims that you're living amongst, because we are not perfect,
Sure.
whereas the religion of Islam is.
Well, even I would go even further than that. I'd say that many Muslims regrettably intimidate and deter others from coming to Islam.
Yes.
Because many Muslims, unfortunately, act in contradiction
Yes.
to what Islam expects from them.
That's true. You'll see Muslims and they're permanently scowling, and the way they conduct themselves unprofessionally, I've had experiences of myself, and that, I think that often puts, the general public off, and they think, what are these Muslims about? They just, maybe they think, they just want to take over or something like that. And it's unfortunate, but the majority of us are nothing like that in the slightest.
True. Well, Brother Hamza, it's really been a great pleasure talking to you. And again, thank you very much for coming to see me this morning.
It's been my pleasure. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair.